Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have a very special team report. We are joined by your North American International Champion, Captain America himself, Patrick. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm enjoying getting to talk about my story and being able to talk about the team. Definitely a very surprising, exciting win, but I'm very grateful to have one and have the opportunity to play some more at Worlds.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. It was a super cool run to watch. The finals, especially, was so exhilarating. It was one of the most exciting finals I've ever seen. But we'll talk about that. First, let's talk about you. You are not a well-known quantity going into this tournament. Tell us about yourself and your VGC journey.
So I started competing in the official circuit in Orlando last year in 2023. And I had some pretty decent early success. I went 8-2 in my first regional. I bubbled out of day two because it was top 32 back then. I attended NAIC and had my worst performance that season, which was 5-3. Then had Orlando Regionals 2024. Went 9-6, got my first day two. And in my fourth event, I won my first major, which is pretty amazing, pretty cool for me. But yeah, pretty new player. And I'm definitely surprised myself at the success I've found so early.
Mm-hmm. And it's always so cool to see players, newer players, come out and do so well at these major tournaments. We saw Justin Tang win a couple of regionals out of nowhere last year. We saw Tim come out of nowhere to get second at EUIC, and it's never really coming out of nowhere because of all the intense competition you have at locals in these online tournaments. So how did you get good so quickly?
I think that a lot of it just had to do with playing a lot of Pokemon and playing very critically. So just constantly trying to find ways to improve my team building and also my play style. I think that practice does make perfect, and a little bit of talent or natural ability plus a lot of time put towards the game and trying to become good at the game is definitely rewarding. And even if it isn't like winning a major, you will progressively get better at some sort of pace, even though it's probably not like a linear progression. Um, you'll definitely improve the more time you put towards the game and the more time you spend playing the game. I was lucky enough to have a really solid local scene that had really consistent tournaments and really decent turnout per local. We always had at least 20 plus people at locals. We had locals that were pushing 70 people in Orlando area. So I got a lot of almost like small regional environments, if that makes any sense,
Mm-hmm.
like in my early career. And I think a lot of exposure to playing in person often, like once a month, and also playing on stream, which our local Florida scene does do, kind of helped me feel comfortable in front of people and also made me feel comfortable playing the very good players we do have in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, so with that, let's talk about your uh, your team itself. So you came to NAIC with this Ice Rider team that is a little bit different from some of the traditional Ice Rider teams we've seen that we saw, like Justin Burns and Jody Pilot. Talk to me about how you approach team building in this format. Actually, I guess first question: was this your first time playing a restricted format?
Technically no. I played Series 12 in Sword and Shield, anticipating that there was going to be a regional in 2022 in Orlando, but that got canceled due to Florida's very backwards COVID policies.
Mm-hmm.
So I did practice Series 12, but back then I was using I think Kieran White and Caloric Shadow whenever I was playing in online tours and started playing VGC more seriously instead of just kind of being a casual viewer. So I think Series 12 is also when I started playing VGC in a very active sense pretty consistently. But yeah, no, not much experience playing restricted, especially a restricted format without any sort of Dynamax or I guess thing that kind of transforms a lot of how the game is played. I mean, Terra does do that, but I guess to a lesser degree.
Mm-hmm. But I've always seen that, or I've always heard that new players have such an adjustment to their first restricted format because it plays so differently. So it's nice
Oh
that you
yeah.
had the experience, but tell me about your experience in Regulation G and the build up to this tournament and how you sort of continue to build on this team.
So I think I gained a lot of consistency over Reg D, E, and F. And going into Reg G, I wanted to try and like reinvent my identity as a player and try like a more balancy team, more kind of well-rounded game style. And I entered the I always knew that I wanted to use Ice Horse. I enjoyed Trick Room as like a play style. And I've always used kind of bulkier teams with the option of Trick Room because I really don't enjoy using Tailwind teams. I'm not a fan of Tornadus. So I wanted some sort of speed control. And I felt like going into the format that the best Trick Room restricted was going to be Calyrex Ice. So I knew from the beginning of the format that the entire format I was going to test Calyrex Ice and try to make the best Calyrex Ice team I could. So going into the first tournament that I was able to play for Reg G, which was Victory Road, I kind of came in confident, going in for my first day two at Orlando Regionals and feeling like I was a pretty good player. And then I get it like I got 0-2'd. I started Victory Road 0-2, ended up dropping, joining another Limitless tour, and then going 0-2 again. So at the very beginning of the format, I kind of felt that introduction to restricted formats, feeling like it was just a whole different game. It felt very off for me. I felt like I kind of had to relearn Pokemon. So this beginning of this format was actually a very big struggle. I wasn't really sure what to do or how to build like around Calyrex Ice. I felt very lost. So I kind of took a step back, watched like for the results of Victory Road, saw what players were using with Calyrex Ice, trying to get a good idea of what was good, and I kind of settled on running a Rain Calyrex core from the beginning of the format, but it was a little bit different than this team. The main differences was instead of Incineroar, I was running Ting Lu, and instead of Raging Bolt, I was running Arcaludon. And I started playing in some tournaments. It was a bit busy of a time for me because I was, in my second semester of law school approaching spring finals. So I wasn't able to test a lot with the Calyrex Ice team. But I had a team building partner test the Arcaludon Tinglu version. They brought it to Indy. They did not have a very good performance at Indy. He came back to me and was like, um, I think we need to change some things. We took some inspiration from Leonard Kraft, the Wobbuffets team. We knew we wanted to keep the Rain core instead of switching off for Farigiraf, but we decided to switch to, at the time, AV Bolt and then a fast Taunt Ensign. So we ended up with the exact same six that we have now back in, I think that was early May. But we kind of had a lot of issues as the format was progressing because the AV Bolt set and the fast Taunt Ensign set weren't, I think, playing well to what we wanted to play well to. We were losing a lot to Zamazenta. We were losing to a few other things. So we went through a couple more transformations. We tried like the Ryan Hague 6, which is the Amoonguss over the Rillaboom. We kept switching like different grass types in the Rillaboom slot. And I think towards the end of May, we kind of had the idea to take even more inspiration from Ryan Hague and also try to reinvent the way we were approaching Incineroar as well as reintroduce Rillaboom. So we ended up doing a booster Bolt set instead of the AV Bolts that we were running prior and the Miracle Seed Rillaboom set we were running prior. And we transitioned into leaning more into the offense of the Bolt and leaning more into the utility of the Rillaboom because Miraidon was also picking up at that time due to Rajon's result. So we decided at that time, which was late May, to get this 6. And I think the only thing that we really changed up until late May into NAIC was switching the Rillaboom's Terra type. A couple spreads, like we made our Rillaboom faster to outspeed Timid Ursaluna, so it hits 115. And then we changed our Incineroar from being fast Incineroar because we were running at the time, I believe, 212 or 252 speed to hit 112 on Incin. And the 100 defense set that was also pulled from Leonard Kraft's team, the fast Incin, but instead of Jolly, we were running, I think it was Impish at the time. And again, we were losing a lot of speed ties, and we were still losing a lot to Zamazenta. So we switched into the Terraghost Will-O-Wisp slower Incin set, so we'd have slower parting shot, and we just kind of accepted that if we ran into a taunt Incin, we'd just rely on our 2 water types and special attacker or Calyrex to handle that. Because taunt Incin's not nearly as threatening into this team as another Wisp Incin. So we settled on using Wisp Instant instead of the traditional Taunt Instant to handle the Zama matchup. We brought back Rillaboom to patch up the Miraidon matchup and also give us the traditional double fake out Urshifu core that's been so good all of Scarlet and Violet that it has been available to us. And then the booster bolt was a very early change that kind of stuck for a while, and then the Pelipper and Ice Rider were pretty much on this team the whole time. Like neither of these sets I think have changed in the last 2 months. We settled on this Calyrex spread as well as this Pelipper spread very early on, and we believe that Pelipper plus Ice Rider was just such a strong core. And trying to figure out, I guess, exactly the type of sets we wanted on the Instant, Rilla, Ursh, and Raging Bolt was the real challenge, I think, in building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I got these comments after my top four run at
Mhm.
LA, where I also had Instant, Rilla, Urshi, Bolt, where everyone's like, you're just using the standard mons. It's so easy to build this team. But no, like, there's a lot of work that you put into these teams. There's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of like nuances that people don't necessarily catch on to. And like you said, you did try out some of the more fun options like Arcaludon, and then no, it turns out that the good mons are actually really good.
they are. Yeah, for
um,
sure. Yeah, and I think like you said, a lot of the kind of skill I think in using these four Pokemon is knowing how to use them or what to use with them. Um, so I think like the things that I often hear people mention to me about my team that they find peculiar, even though it is a pretty normal kind of six Pokemon, like none of them are really that flashy. Is the Terra Normal Rillaboom, the Terra Fairy Bolt, and then the Adamant Ensign. For some reason, I guess that caught people off guard. Um, and all of them have really straightforward answers of why we made those adaptations. They were basically just anticipations of where we thought the meta was going. Um, I feel like Ice Rider's hardest matchup is Zamazenta, traditionally. And Zamazenta is a really good Pokemon. We wanted to respect it going in, me and my one team building partner, Landon Moorhall, Riku VGC. So we wanted to run Taunt, or not Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Terra Ghost Ensign to be able to have the threat of Wisp onto the Zamazenta. And also, contrary to what a lot of people I think have thought about our Bolt set, the reason we're running Terra Fairy is also for Zamazenta. It is nice for the Draco Meteor immunity or the mind games that come with it. But the primary reason we ended up running Terra Fairy Bolt was to be able to beat the wide guard variants of Zamazenta instead of the traditional Iron Defense sets, because a lot of the wide guard sets are running Galarian Moltres, which could be a really big issue for Terra Ghost Ensign as well as our Calyrex. So we kind of relied on Terra Fairy Bolt to resist the body press and also to resist the fire wraths that come out from those Moltres and be able to deal large chunk damage to either of those two Pokemon. So yeah, a lot of these decisions kind of revolved around being able to beat the Zama matchup very consistently. And then the Terra Normal Rillaboom was basically just a like I think in the last 5 days before the tournament that was the last change we made, and really the only change we've made in the last few weeks. I mean, it was honestly just to give us an answer into a Smeargle CSR teamer running into in high ladder, and while I dodged that during the tournament, I almost had to play that in finals. So I'm definitely happy I had the Terra Normal Rillaboom as an option.
mhm. And so, like you said, a lot of you covered some of the more interesting picks on the team, but I want to go over the individual Pokemon and
Mm-hmm.
some of what the EV spreads do, as well as maybe some of the other choices that you considered and why you came to the conclusions that you did. I think starting probably with Calyrex Ice, the center point of the team. So and you have a pretty standard move set, but the Terra type does change between a lot of teams, and the EV spread changes between a lot of teams. So tell me about why you ran Terra Water, why you ran the EV spread that you did, and then maybe any other sort of differences in Calyrex Ice that you considered going in with your team.
So Calyrex Ice was a Pokemon that I didn't feel like needed 252, 252 in attack. I feel like the damage was really good, irrespective of having max attack or not. So we hit 222 just to be able to hit like an even number for boost, and it's just above the jump number, which I think is 218 to 220. So the hitting the 222 attack was just a solid number. I grew comfortable with the calcs I didn't really ever miss any more attack. But I think the only thing that I specifically made this Calyrex to do, which did come in handy, I think with other calcs obviously as well, is that the 116 special attack allows our Calyrex without Terra to survive a Life Orb, Timid Max, Astral Barrage from CSR, from full health. So being able to survive that and being able to Terra another piece around it, like the Terra Normal Rillaboom or the Raging Bolt, really allowed for our Calyrex to catch other CSRs off guard. So the extra special bulk was specifically for this CSR matchup, but it also came up often against Terapagos teams or other teams that relied on those strong special attackers to kind of blow up the Calyrex, especially after coaching or after some Ensign Intimidate debuffs or Parting Shot debuffs. And the extra bulk was really useful. I don't understand why so many Calyxes just kind of accept the 252 attack, 252 HP, other than the hard trick room ones. But for a Balancy core, I felt like the extra special bulk came in handy a lot. It allowed me to make a lot more mistakes with Calyrex and play a little bit more aggressively. It allowed me to always survive a Terra Electric Electro Drift from Miraidon Modest in grassy terrain. It allowed me to survive a lot of things that whenever I was playing in the tournament, players were surprised by. Just because they're so used to the 252 calcs. And the Terra Water was just basically the best defensive type to use. I think the utility types on Calyrex are good on specific teams. I do understand why people run Terra Fire and Terra Grass, and I don't think that they're like worse than Terra Water. But I feel like my team had enough answers into Amoonguss and into Will-O-Wisp and Incineroar to not want to compromise like the defensive issues that come with the utility Terra types, and give me just a better overall defensive type. With Terra Water, you're able to, resist water spouts from Kyogre, which makes the Kyogre matchup a lot more bearable. It allows you to not sacrifice any defensive prowess against your mirror matches. Because if you're a Terra Fire Calyrex, then often those other Calyrex teams will have an Urshifu or a Rainset or something that could hit the Calyrex. And then they often have a Moongus. They don't even have a Grass type. You can really hit your Calyrex. And with Grass Terra type, you also become weak to the opposing Calyrex in front of you. So despite the utility from the Fire and Grass typing, I found in testing that the Water typing was just much more consistent into a broad array of matchups. And for the most part, the only reason I'd ever want to click Grass or Fire Terra was almost exclusively to utility, because just because of the downsides of those typings. So yeah, the Water was just the best middle ground typing I could find. I didn't feel like I needed the immunity to Will-O-Wisp or the immunity to Spore on my Calyrex Ice. And the only really compromising offensive types for Water are Grass and Electric, and the two best Grass and Electric types offensively right now are Rillaboom and Raging Bolt. And if you're somewhat smart or patient with your Terra, and understand that Glacial Lance threatens either an Oko or almost all of their health with the move, then it's pretty easy to play around Raging Bolt and Rillaboom as your two primary offensive threats with Water Terra. So yeah, I just felt like it was really good, really solid defensively. It was very consistent into the most matchups, and yeah.
Mhm. Makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And then you talked about the Incineroar a little bit, but I am curious, why did you choose to run Adamant? Was there a specific calc in mind?
Um, it was similar, a similar kind of thought process to what I described. A lot of my team, and a lot of how I like to play is I like to kind of cover options offensively, and I think knockoff allows you, at least if it's adamant, to hit certain damage rolls or certain switch-ins a little bit harder than you normally would with Ensign. For instance, I'm able to KO the Terrifier Calyrexes with knockoff plus surging strikes because I am adamant. And if I was careful and didn't have any attack investment, there's a decent chance that I wouldn't be able to do that. So that extra attack isn't really to hit any specific damage calc. It's more so to hit the double up rolls than I'd want to cover for Terras offensively.
Makes sense. Um,
Yeah, because the obviously the Wisp baits out Terra fires often, so the knockoff into Surging Strikes can really pressure that.
yeah. Uh, and then I guess looking at the other Pokemon, I think that you talked again about why you have Terra Normal on Rillaboom. But talk to me about the Rillaboom and why you chose this these EVs, and also if you considered any of the other moves that Rillaboom has.
So the move set I didn't really want to change. I think the only thing I would possibly consider is um, high horsepower over U-turn, but I enjoyed the ability to have a pivot. But the speed stat is the speed stat and attack stat were the primary things that I did consider. Everything else was actually just kind of eyeballed. The speed stat hits 115, so I always outspeed Timid or Saluna. Which whenever the Rajon team was super prominent and Timid Ursulina was everywhere, it could become a really big issue for my team when I only have two Pokemon that can consistently outspeed it, and both of those are just weak to Miraidon, um, being the Pelipper and the Urshifu. So I wanted to speed creep the Timid Ursulinas that I would occasionally run into, and it also helped me speed creep the bulkier Pokemon or um, the Pokemon who only wanted to hit 112 for Tailwind for CSR, for max speed CSR. So it also sped crept some of those Pokemon, but the primary reason I hit 115 speed was to outspeed Timid Ursaluna for the Miraidon matchup. And the attack stat is enough to basically guarantee a 2-hit KO on almost all Iron Hand sets. Um, and the bulk was just kind of eyeballed from there. The bulk isn't specifically calc to live anything, but I didn't really find myself dying or losing my Rillaboom to any moves that I felt like it shouldn't.
Makes sense. And then I guess the last really interesting EV spread for me is the Raging Bolt. And so you talked about why you ran Booster, why you ran Terra Fairy, but I've seen a huge variance in Raging Bolt EV spreads, ranging from literally max speed to max special attack as you're running to very little special attack and a lot of bulk. Tell me about your Raging Bolt.
So Raging Bolt was often kind of used as my like second restricted. It felt like my other primary damage dealer alongside Calyrex Ice and occasionally Urshifu. But it also had a lot more bulk than the Calyrex Ice afforded. I put in 60 speed EVs because I believe that hits 103. So I'm always going to be under speeding the base 85s in Trick Room. So I'm able to outspeed them under Trick Room. But I'm still faster than a lot of the bulkier AV bolts, which was really nice to have. The HP hits the 224 bump. The 4-4 hits the 224 like grassy terrain recovery bump. The 4 and 4 hit are just extra spread like or extra points that I didn't invest in speed because I didn't really feel a need to hit 104 instead of 103, so I just put 4-4 in the defenses. And I wanted max special attack, so I could always guarantee a KO into any Amoonguss with any Terra type with the combination of Thunderbolt plus Glacial.
Make sense?
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of made up for the lack of attack on the Calyrex itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the philosophy of basically having a second restricted. It feels like a lot of the strong teams are doing that, especially with the electric ice pin that is so strong in this
Mhm.
format.
Absolutely.
And so I guess the Urshifu set and the Urshifu EV spread and the Pelipper EV spread don't look like anything too fancy, but I do want to hear about your choice of moves on Urshifu. We haven't seen or coaching in U-turn. I feel like a lot of people opt for one or the other as the flex slot. Tell me
Mhm.
about why you ran those two.
So coaching was something I was very early on a fan of. I started using it, I think, on the first iteration of this team back in April, and it just kind of felt like a natural thing to use with Calyrex Ice. I feel like in the prior formats, coaching wasn't a useful tech because rarely you'd have such a bulky and powerful physical attacker that would just want to sit on the field and would provide more value from having the +1 boost in attack and defense than just outright surging striking. So I think coaching is a weird option because most of the time you're just better off attacking with Urshifu. You're going to get more out of the turn. But being able to play mind games with a opposing Raging Bolt, or being able to just throw up a coaching and make Calyrex, especially with my significant special bulk, very difficult to remove, was a really nice a nice thing to have as an option. U-turn allowed me to have three Pokemon who could reposition around the Calyrex, the Ensign, the Rillaboom, and the Urshifu. I enjoyed having the option of U-turn, even though I very rarely clicked it. And it also allowed me to to pressure the just pressure the switch, being able to make opponents second guess about switching on a Surging Search of close combat, assuming I would just U-turn. So just having the threat of U-turn and having the threat of coaching provides a lot of pressure, I think, on the board state, as much as Surging Strikes and close combat do. And I didn't really feel a need for any other moves. I guess I could have ran Spinner or Aqua Jet or some other flex slot move, but nothing felt as useful on a game to game basis than U-turn and coaching, despite clicking Surging Strikes or close combat, probably 85% of the time. Um,
Mhm.
it was just really nice utility. After one coaching, there are some ranges and attacks and damage rolls that Calyrex can hit that catch a lot of people off guard. It's able to survive a lot defensively. It also allows me to be patient as well with my Calyrex and its Terra, because it gets more physical bulk than it would normally have. So I don't have to immediately commit to the Terra if I'm sitting in front of something that I would not want to Terra in front of. So I really like the coaching option. It came up a surprising amount. I was very comfortable with the move choice as well. I'd had almost 2 months of practice with coaching Urshifu plus Calyrex Ice. So I think just having the option to boost my Calyrex without Glacial or Grimnay boosts was really nice to have. Yeah, I don't really see a better Urshifu moveset on these Calyrex Ice teams, just personally. I could see the Terra Ghost reasoning, but Terra Water hits a lot of damage rolls that I wanted to hit. It helped against the occasional Citrus Berry Calyrex Shadow, because I was able to ignore the Citrus Berry on the Calyrex Shadow if Ice Rider was on the field, and if they were not bulky enough to survive a Terra Water Surging Strikes from near max Adamant attack, then they'd just lose their Calyrex. So I found that to be really nice as an option. And then the Pelipper, I didn't run Helping Hand because I still wanted the option of Protect, even though there is some anti-synergy with Protect and Wide Guard. I didn't find myself... I never had a single scenario in this tournament just because I was comfortable with this four moves that I ever had to Protect and then Wide Guard and risk the failure, or vice versa. So just having the option of Protect and having the option of Wide Guard just allows Pelipper to sit on the field and be able to reposition more comfortably. And I didn't really miss the Helping Hand in any capacity, because since my Pelipper has a decent amount of special attack, I found often more value from just attacking with the Pelipper instead of Helping Handing. And the EV spread does do one specific thing with the bulk. Running calcs with my Pelipper, I found that I didn't need to hit 252 special attack to really change any rolls on a couple things that I wanted to take KOs on, such as Koraidon. In some cases, in some Koraidon sets, it actually did not change the damage roll at all. And this little bit of HP and this little bit of defense allows me to guarantee survive Terra Water Surging Strikes from an opposing Urshifu, instead of having like a 12% chance to lose my Pelipper.
Yep. It's always fun to see Sash Bonds running a little bit of bulk, and I feel like it's always because of Surging Strikes. I saw it
Always
on Rajin
Urshifu.
with, I think Rajin had it on Whimsicott as well for the same reason.
Wasn't it
But yeah,
44 defense or something for
yeah,
Rajan's
yeah,
Whimsicott? Yep. Yeah.
yep, it was something like that. But yeah, so that's a great overview of the Pokemon themselves. I'm very interested in hearing about how you actually play the team. I know a lot of people are going to want to try this team out. And yeah, and for me at least, speaking from experience, I know I played John Miller, who top cut Los Angeles with a similar team, just having the Goldie um, over your Raging Bolt, and was very surprised because the Rillaboom disrupts your game plans in a very different way than the Amoonguss disrupts your game
Hmm.
plans on more traditional teams. And I'm good friends with Justin. I'm good friends with Ryan. I've heard a lot about the Amoonguss variant and how it plays. Tell me about how the Rillaboom variant plays, and what your game plans are going into some of the more common teams you might face.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Amoonguss, I guess from my perspective, because I have tested the Ryan 6 and the traditional Amoonguss 6. It's really nice for being able to pressure the defensive Terra with Spore if they don't have a goggles, or allowing your Calyrex to really thrive and have different opportunities that wouldn't exist without the pressure of Terra Grass. But I found that Rillaboom can often do the same thing into certain teams, like the Kyogre teams that often run Terra Grass on the bulkier teams. They would be afraid of Woodhammer for obvious reasons, and they would often Terra Grass anyway. So I was able to kind of get the same value from certain water types or certain Pokemon that were weak to the Woodhammer, and I was able to bait out the defensive Terra Grass in order to get my Glacial Lances off. And because I'm Terra Water, even an Origin Pulse isn't going to do that much damage to me. And rarely do the Mystic Water Kyogre sets even run Thunder. They're usually Ice Beam. So I have one of the few Calyrex sets that can comfortably sit in front of Kyogre. And the Woodhammer and the offensive pressure of U-Turn as well into the Terra Grass was really nice for certain mind games and certain positions. So I found the offensive pressure of Woodhammer to kind of supplement Calyrex in a similar way. But I think the primary difference between Amoonguss and Rillaboom is obviously you have a much better Miraidon matchup whenever you have Rillaboom. I did lose to a Miraidon. I lost to Nox. I lost to his Volcarona variant, which I had not played up to that point in testing either, and I was caught off guard by how much Volcarona can disrupt this team with Miraidon. But I did end up beating it later that day, and still in day one 2-0. So I figured out the matchup. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was initially. I think I just got outplayed by a really good player. But Rillaboom helps a lot into the Miraidon matchup. It allows you to overwrite terrain. It allows you to have pressure of fake out. You don't have to essentially sacrifice your Amoonguss or Rage Powder Terra Fairy a Draco or play those mind games. You can just kind of consistently mitigate the damage of the Miraidon. You have fake out pressure. You kind of force them to bring Farigiraf because you have so many fake outs. And they already do want to bring Farigiraf because it's Calyrex Ice, but the offensive pressure of Woodhammer, the ability to have 6 Pokemon who constantly threaten some sort of damage or threaten repositioning or threaten disruption with fake out. Just having so many options, I think made the team a bit more uncomfortable to play around, especially against teams that don't have such a similar dedicated balance core. Um, and I also felt like going into this tournament, Amoonguss is really good. Amoonguss is always really good, and people often respect Amoonguss, especially at higher tables. So every team has a goggles, every team has a grass type, every team has something to handle Amoonguss. And Amoonguss can often feel like dead weight if the opponent just brings the correct Pokemon into Amoonguss. The best you can do is Pollen Puff and heal up your own Pokemon, or Rage Powder a few things, or have to play mind games or knock off Spore. But it leads to it leads to stale board states that I don't like to play with. And Rillaboom, if it's on the field, is never a stale piece. Woodhammer, even intimidated, is going to be able to threaten a decent amount of damage. You always have U-turn to reposition the board to get another fake out up with Incineroar. And it also has fake out itself, so it allows you to, fake out the one piece that may be threatening Calyrex, and also, just provide terrain recovery for Calyrex to sit around for a while. And that helps whenever I do click coaching more than I think the average Calyrex Ice player does. It provides that slower, kind of consistent recovery, unlike Pollen Puff, which you do have to dedicate an entire turn to an entire move to. So I think it provides a similar role as a grass type, but in my opinion, and for my preference as a player and as a team builder, it felt a lot less, I think, passive or potentially stale, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Absolutely. Like I said, I didn't get to play you sadly, but I did get to play John in LA, and so I got to experience it firsthand. How strong it is, how strong that double fake out core can be,
Hmm.
and that grass ice pin can be. But yeah, so with that, let's talk about how you actually play the team. So you said you've played this team for a long time. Did you go into this tournament with sort of set game plans into some of the common teams, or were you just kind of like, I've played this enough, I know what I'm going to do when I see the team sheet?
I think yes to both of those questions. I had very set game plans into the very like popular versions of teams, like the Maridon Chiyu team that's been running around, or your CSR team, or um the traditional like Chandler Zamazenta team that was popularized by ESM, or the other Zamazenta team that was popularized by I forget who. They got top 8 at India, I think it was the Latios version or Latios version.
Mhm.
So I had very familiar, like I had very strict game plans into those versions of the team. But in practice, I faced a lot of unique variants of teams that I was somewhat familiar with. So I did kind of have to create flexible game plans into them. But I don't think that's too much of an issue, considering my team is built in a very flexible manner. It isn't really necessarily modes based. You don't really have to rely on like any specific lead like Pelipper plus Urshifu to create like any sort of momentum or a good board state. I'm pretty sure in this tournament I led Calyrex Ice plus one of these 5 Pokemon more than once, like during both days. Um, and I think in practice I have used almost every combination of this team. The only combination I can't think of using is maybe like Pelipper plus Incin. But I think other than that, this team, depending on the matchup, can pretty much lead anything. And I think that's really nice for me. It allows me to have pieces that even if I lead poorly, I could still reposition into one of the better pieces with one of my pivot moves. Or if I do lead correctly, or even in team preview, it's kind of hard for my opponent to identify exactly what lead I want because the team doesn't really have it doesn't have a distinct identity. It's not like a hard trick room team or a Kyogre team, which kind of has like its dedicated traditional leads. So I think that this team really thrived off its versatility and allowed me to kind of it gave me an easier time than my opponents in figuring out lead games, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There's so many threats, and every single threat has to be accounted for
Mhm.
on this team.
Yep.
Um, and so I guess, uh, did you have so did you have any matchups going into the tournament where you had very specific game plans, maybe that you didn't have that flexibility that you kind of wanted in most matchups?
Yes. I had very strict game plans into CSR, but I actually did not play a single CSR in either day or in Top Cut.
Man, I should have kept using Shadow Rider. Everyone I talk to keeps saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I
um,
that's the only team I had a distinct line into because I think the two Calyrexes are clearly the two best restricteds. I think CSR is probably slightly better than Calyrex Ice. Maybe. I think it's just harder to use than Calyrex Ice. But I did have strict lines into Calyrex Shadow Rider, specifically the Smeargle and Clef versions, which
mhm,
would just be some variant of Rillaboom, Calyrex, and Raging Bolt as my leads, depending on which version of the team I was playing, and I'd pretty much always bring Incin or Urshifu as the back flex slot. But if I was playing into CSR, then I couldn't play as fun. I didn't really have that much flexibility because CSR is oppressive and terrifying, and I don't want to let them get a nasty plot or Calm Mind off.
mhm. Absolutely. Uh, and so I guess with that, let's talk about your
Mhm.
tournament run. Because like you said, you played um, a pretty diverse array of teams. That are a little, all everyone. I think at this tournament, especially, kind of used something somewhat standard, but had their own twist to it. Even you did kind of. So I'm curious. Tell me
Mhm.
about some of the more notable matches you played. over the course of your run to becoming NAIC champion?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have any notable things to say about my first 5 rounds. They were all pretty quick sets, but I did play a very broad variety of teams in the first 5 rounds. I played Zacian, Miraidon, Groudon, Zamazenta, and Terapagos all in my first 5 rounds. So I was definitely having to rely on that ability to play flexibly. But I think one thing about my run that was a bit frustrating was the amount of different Zamazenta teams that I faced. Like I said going in, I was very scared of Zamazenta. I think it's very hard for Ice Rider teams to play. And that's why I kind of over respected it in team building. And I think the first Zamazenta match that I really wanted to highlight was against Michael Zhang. That was a really tricky matchup. Just because the lead of Moltres and Zamazenta, which I had to play 3 separate times against 3 separate players, kind of disrupts almost all of my leads that I could have because it's wide guard Zamazenta. So even if I get Trick Room up, I can't kind of rely on that ability to freely Glacial Lance. So against Michael, I had to. The first turn against Michael was actually kind of tragic for Michael. Um, I led Urshifu plus Calyrex Ice into Zamazenta and Moltres as a lead. And I believe that I Surging Striked the Moltres and then protected my Calyrex trying to bait in a foul play into the Calyrex. And I didn't read team sheets well. I think I was getting a little bit of day one fatigue. And I didn't realize Michael had Hurricane on his his Moltres, which I had never run into in testing. I guess I just assumed it was his taunt. But they missed Hurricane turn one, and I was able to kind of just like eliminate the threats from there. And game one was pretty decided on turn one after missing that Hurricane. I after the Surging Strikes, I followed up with another Surging Strikes and a Glacial Lance, predicting that Michael would switch Rillaboom in to resist the Glacial or resist the Surging Strikes, and predicting that Michael would also not wide guard in order to protect the Ice Rider. So I was able to get a really quick advantage. I got the +1 boost on Ice Rider after Surging Strikes into the Glacial Lance, and won really decidedly from there. And game two is a lot more awkward. I had to, actually respect Hurricane as a threat. But I ended up getting Trick Room up, and I was able to Terra Fairy my Bolt and get a Wisp onto the Zamazenta to make um, game two much more bearable. But I think that was my first set where I felt like a lot of my Zama prep payoff, and it was a really good back and forth despite it ending in 2 sets. And I think similarly, the match right before against Justin Knox was my first loss, and it was my only O2 loss of the entire tournament. I had not faced the Volcarona version of Miraidon in practice, and I really approached this matchup very very poorly. And I let them get off Quiver Dances. I let them get pretty advantageous board states, and they ended up beating me. I think in a total of like 9 turns or something like that. They were able to pin me with their Iron Hands, their Assault Vest Iron Hands against my Raging Bolt, who was -2, and they were full health. And we just played a Drain Punch Draco Meteor endgame, which they ended up winning in game two. But I was lucky enough to face that matchup again in round 8. And I had a couple experiences like that in this tournament. I ended up winning against Max 2-0. I ended up kind of figuring out the matchup, at least an option into the matchup, which was nice. And then round 9, in a similar capacity, I faced the Moltres team. I led the exact same thing. I led Urshifu Calyrex. This time, I don't believe they had Hurricane as an option in round 9. So I was able to very freely take out the Moltres. I baited out a foul play into the Calyrex. And I played pretty poorly. I ended up leading Urshifu into a booster flutter and let them just Moonblast my Urshifu and Okode on turn 1. of game 3. But it was able to get a burn off on their Zamazenta and was able to kind of just play around that huge mistake turn 1 and win that set in 3 games. But I had to face, I guess to highlight the fact that I was facing duplicate teams a couple times, I had to face his team building partner, Kevin, in round 12, but didn't make nearly as many mistakes into that. But I do want to focus more on my day 2 because I believe other than my match against Kevin, every single day 2 match that I played went to game 3, which was really interesting. Um, Daniel Yu was the first Ice Rider mirror that I played. This was alongside the match against Antonio Sanchez. These were both posted on Leonard Craft Wobbuffet's YouTube channel. You can view the the matchups there and how they played out. But I ended up winning this set in 3. And a lot of the reason I was able to win this set was my Terra Water Urshifu and the fact that they were the more traditional taunt Ensign set. I applied a lot of pressure with my own Ensign with Will-O-Wisp, and they did not apply nearly as much defensive pressure on me with Terra Fire that I did with Terra Water. And Amoonguss was a non-factor. If it did come, I don't think it was able to get a move off. But this was kind of a really good demonstration of how my 6 traditionally pairs up very well into the mirror. At least the Moongus mirror. This one also had a Rillaboom, but I think even if it was Bolt, it probably wouldn't have been much different. But that matchup was pretty good. I believe I only dropped the game just kind of playing poorly and getting outplayed by Daniel. Then I faced Justin Burns in round 11, which is a really interesting set. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched. And I lost in game 3. I won game 1, lost game 2, and lost game 3. Game 1, I was able to kind of use my offensive Incineroar to eliminate the Calyrex pretty quickly, and was able to like intimidate the Iron Hands and just get an advantageous board state pretty quickly. Was able to take game 1 pretty confidently, but in game 2 and 3, Justin caught me in 2 different ways. They ended up using Urshifu Dark really well in game 2 and was able to pin me in multiple spots where I didn't have a great switch into Dark Fu plus Iron Hands. And then in game 3, after beating me offensively, they were able to position Amoonguss under Trick Room and were able to very cleanly beat my team just for not having enough pieces, not having Rillaboom and Ensign to stop Amoonguss from just getting sleeps off. So Justin was my second loss. It was in 3 games. It was a good back and forth, but it kind of highlighted the fact that if I was playing a Amoonguss and they were able to get like speed control or get in a board state where they threaten my 2 immunities, then I kind of don't have great counterplay to it. So kind of in contrast to what I said earlier, where I said that Amoonguss isn't much of a threat, but I suppose if you're as good of a player as Justin is, then you can make Amoonguss threatening irrespective of having multiple answers. And that was also I had one of my roommates saying that as long as I didn't face a Justin in the finals, then I should be able to win because I lost to the 2 Justins that I did play in this tournament. So I'm very glad that I dodged all the other Justins. But yeah, I talked about Kevin's match. They built with Blake. I kind of used the game against Blake against Kevin, assuming that they talked about the matchup, and Kevin knew going in what I did against Blake. I basically I changed every single turn that I made against Blake against Kevin, and I was able to beat Kevin in 2. Antonio's another game that was on a side TV, is recorded and out there if somebody wants to watch it. I lost game 1, I won game 2, and then lost game 3. In my opinion, after fixing my Zamazenta matchup and getting rid of Taunt specifically, I feel like Screamtail Terapagos is the hardest team for my team to beat, specifically if they have Wisp Ensign themselves. And I felt like going into the Antonio match, obviously Antonio being a regional winner and being an excellent player in their own right, top cutting this tournament. Um, they had a lot of really good options to me, and if you watch our set, I pretty much led fake out plus Urshifu in every turn, every round except for one where I think I led Calyrex plus Urshifu, trying to either scare Incin from being on the board or threaten the fake out plus close combat into the Terapagos, maybe pressuring Terra. Um, but Antonio was very calm. They didn't kind of fall for my baits, and they definitely played their advantage. The only reason I was able to win game two is I made some really, really hard reads and got them right and was able to eliminate key defensive pieces that Antonio had. But I think that this Screamtail Terapagos team into my Ice Rider balance team is a real nightmare. And I'm very glad that I did dodge Antonio in top cut, because I do not think that I would be able to take a game off him in cut. I think that my hard reads and tricks became kind of old, and he was able to really, really decisively win once he kind of figured me out. And then moving on to Taran. This is another Terapagos team, but this was Specs Terapagos, which I find to be handedly better. We went to game three. I think that the only really thing I want to highlight against the Taran set is that I think I had my absolute luckiest moment of the entire tournament against Taran. Which was in one of our games. My Calyrex Ice was able to survive a terrestrialized Hyper Beam from Terapagos from full health. So I was able to survive the Hyper Beam with my spread. And I ran the calc afterwards, and I believe that was only one damage roll that I was able to survive that from. So I got the absolute best damage roll and was able to win off of that. So yeah, that was a stressful set, but Taran played excellently, and I think that set really kind of gave me a more confident game plan also going into finals, because I'd played a high level Specs Tarot player, and I kind of figured out where I was playing poorly into it. But yeah, that set was very complicated. Shiyu having Covert Cloak also makes things awkward, and Amoonguss, in my opinion, is much worse for my team to play into than the Urshifu variant that Aurelion used. Because it kind of forced me to not click Trick Room, just of the threat of Amoonguss in the back. And then Abhe was also another 3-game set. It was against Kyogre. They played really well. They got, I think, 3 Origin Pulse misses across the 3 sets. I'm almost sure one of them did matter significantly as well. They clicked Origin Pulse a lot. Not sure if they got it statistically even or not, but I know that I did get a pulse miss in one of the sets that did matter, so they played excellently, got a little unlucky, I got a little lucky, and then I was able to clinch my win in very, very stressful fashion, and then up into top 8.
Yeah. And I think Abide said that, yeah, one of them mattered, but also I hit more Origin Pulses than I missed over the course of the tournament. So it kind of evens out, right? You got to click that move a
Yeah,
lot.
fair enough. Fair enough.
And then, I did not, I don't think I get to watch your top 8 set against Shiliang, but I think I also saw a tweet about an Origin Pulse miss about in that set too.
Oh yeah, that set I got greedy because I remember that turn exactly. He did get an Origin Pulse miss. I also saw Shiliang say though that they clicked a suboptimal move because they could have pollen puffed into water spouting instead to not risk the miss. But basically, I was kind of okay with losing the Calyrex that turn anyway. I don't think I lost if I did. But my Calyrex was 70%. Shiliang hit a Ruination on the Calyrex, and then they missed the Origin Pulse at the 30%, 35% marker, and allowed my Calyrex to pick off, I believe, the Kyogre in that same turn because they did not click the Pollen Puff Water Spout play. So yeah, that was very convenient. But I guess in my defense, Ruination, Leech Seed, Origin Pulse, all pretty especially with a slow team where you click it so often, you're gonna eventually miss one. I felt more bad for Abhe because I think that one mattered a little bit more, but yeah, Shiliang definitely got unlucky there, and I got lucky with Paras as well. I was able to break through a lot of full paras.
Mhm. And then, yeah. So tell me about your top four in finals.
Okay, so top four was really fun. It was the very basic Miraidon Chiyu team that I've played a million times. I'm very familiar with my lines into it. I kept leading Urshifu plus Calyrex into it. Game one and game three, I led that, and I adjusted game two because they seemed very stubborn about their game plans. But this was the first time I've ever played a Miraidon Chiyu team where they did not bring Chiyu into me, which I thought was very odd. Um, but the sets were really good. This was like very good back and forth Pokemon. I don't know if you've seen these sets. Um,
Nope.
but Miraidon, I think, as a team and as an identity, is a very offensive style of team. It's not read heavy, but it is very hyper offensive. And if you make poor reads, it doesn't afford you a lot of mistakes. And I kind of felt like through games, I lost game one, won game two, and game three. I think just constantly making Jan second guess himself and make plays that they thought would gain them the quick advantage and not playing a little bit more patient with their pieces or making the safer plays really enabled me to kind of really take game two and game three very decisively. They often didn't go for the safest play, and I think that as someone who feels very comfortable playing aggressively and playing a bit of a read heavy game, it felt really it felt really comfortable. It was probably the most comfortable I was all of day two in a matchup. Um, just because I knew that I don't know. I love going kind of blow to blow with very aggressive teams. I like kind of breaking down their offenses very quickly. I like making those reads. Even though they're pretty stressful to play against, I find them to be some of the most fun to play. So
Mhm.
yeah, this set was good. I know that there was a big pop off in the audience in Game Three, Turn One, just because I protected my Calyrex and they Terra Electric Electro drifted, helping handed to try to catch me U-turning with my Urshifu into a Rillaboom, and they were trying to still pick up the KO on the Calyrex, but the protect CC into CC was definitely a fun play that I'd done in practice, and I'm glad I was able to pull it off on stream as well.
Yeah. And so this was the last round in day two. You had played
Mhm.
8 rounds of day two. I can tell you, I played 5 rounds of day two, and I was dead tired afterwards. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine what you're going through after having played that much. But I'm always curious because about the finals matches because they're very different than a
Mhm.
normal set. You have a whole night to prepare,
Yeah.
and at least for us as the spectators, we were looking at your schedule. We saw that you had lost to Roxon, who was a good friend of ours, and it sounded like that matchup was really difficult. And so I was like,
Mhm.
I don't, and I lost to Aurelian. Aurelian's so good at Pokemon, so I was
They're
betting
very
against
good.
you. we saw
Yeah.
we saw the commentators, and I think the only person who thought you were going to win was Gabby. And so it seemed like an uphill matchup for you. Tell me about your
Mhm.
preparation. It seemed like you were very, very prepared going into finals with the way that you were. We got to see your perspective, the way you're clicking your moves.
Yeah, for sure. I was I was very prepared. I think one of the nice things about being a newer player is I kind of um I also chose to approach finals in my own like kind of unique way. So going into finals, I refused to play any practice sets because I had a lot of respect for Aurelian. And I don't think that if I played anybody in practice sets, they were going to play as well as Aurelian. So I knew going in that my prep for finals was all going to be basically just mental Pokemon, like playing in my mind, trying to figure out the lines mentally, and trying to like get in the mind of Aurelian and trying to understand like how Aurelian was going to play instead of just playing practice sets on Showdown, playing like the teams themselves. So I had a lot of respect for Aurelian, and I think that the fact that I didn't have a lot of respect going in was like something I felt like was to my advantage. I think on paper this team does look it has a favorable matchup into mine. I don't know if you disagree.
I
Um,
think it's about right. Yeah.
yeah, slightly favorable. I don't think it's like too favorable, but I do think it's slightly favorable for Aurelian. Um, But the first thing I did going home, I was exhausted. I had not eaten that day. All I had had was a cup of coffee that morning and some water throughout the day, so I was very hungry. So I went to a Japanese restaurant with all the people in my Airbnb. We got some food there. Um, and then I went home after that, and then I just started reviewing my own sets. I spent all of Saturday night reviewing how I played and also trying to like remember exactly how I played into Roxen. Is that Antonio?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I did all of my like I was thinking about Roxen, how I played Roxen, kind of knowing that Roxen is a European player as well, and I don't know if Aurelian and Roxen are connected, but if they were, I wanted to know not to try to beat Aurelian like I tried to beat Roxen. So that was one thing I had coming into mind is just I wanted to kind of subvert Aurelian's expectations going into finals. I did want to play like I had played in top four, top eight, and the two side stream matches just in case Aurelian had seen those side stream matches or had somebody who had them recorded. So I was just trying to figure out how to beat Aurelian in a way that I normally wouldn't play Aurelian, but still playing to my strengths as a player. So after reviewing my own like games and my own sets, I realized that into Terapagos and in general, whenever I play Pokemon, especially with this team, I really rely on Urshifu very heavily. I think this was the only set of the day where I did not bring Urshifu. Um, or like any of the days, I should clarify. This was the
I was gonna say
only best of
only
three
set of the
this
day,
tournament
period.
where I yeah, sorry, yeah, only set of the day, but only set of the entire tournament where I did not bring Urshifu. So that was my biggest gamble, as I knew that I was never going to adjust Urshifu into Aurelian because I knew that Aurelian had seen me use Urshifu pretty well, and knew that I relied on it to beat Terapagos teams. So I kind of like said to myself, if I'm going to win, I'm going to do it without like the thing that I'm probably best at using, or the thing that at least that I use as a crutch to be a good player. So I woke up early Saturday. We were gonna go to breakfast, but before breakfast, like as a group, our Airbnb, I pulled up Aurelian's matches. I watched Aurelian's match against you, and then I watched Aurelian's match against Justin Burns, because those were the two Ice Rider matches I could find that Aurelian played. Aurelian would always always bring Grimmsnarl into those matches. I also watched Aurelian's top eight and top four matches, but or I guess top eight was Burns, but I watched the top four match against Edu as well. Um, and I picked up on a few things that Aurelian tended to do at the time. Maybe Aurelian fixes this now, so I don't think anybody who plays Aurelian should expect this because Aurelian, like you said, is like such a talented player. They're so good. And I expect them to only be better after this tournament. I do not want to face them again. um, but I knew that Aurelian had a habit of always bringing Grimmsnarl into Ice Rider matchups, specifically Grimmsnarl Urshifu, which kind of showed that Aurelian had a similar philosophy to playing around offensive peaches that I did, which is to like they like to cover for Terras and cover for like switches and cover just like they like to cover for things offensively. So they often would lead Urshifu plus Grimmsnarl threatening surging strikes and foul play into the Calyrex Ice, not letting it have any sort of safe board position. You get free damage with surging strikes. It just becomes really uncomfortable for the Calyrex player if the Calyrex player leads Calyrex, which is a common thing that Calyrex players do because Calyrex is so good on lead. Um, but I kind of anticipated that Aurelian would follow that same philosophy, which was just, but instead of covering with Urshifu, I thought Aurelian would cover with Grimmsnarl plus Hand. And I was kind of wrong. They Aurelian led Fluttermane and Grimmsnarl against me game one, but that also kind of told me that Aurelian most likely did have some familiarity with how I played into Terapagos teams because as a habit and as a player, this is something I'll have to fix because I'm revealing this, but um, I always lead for the most part into every Terapagos matchup, Urshifu plus Calyrex at lead, because often I feel like if there are the Rillaboom Terapagos teams, the balancier ones, the ones with covert or leftovers, they'll lead Rillaboom plus Terapagos instead of Incin plus Terapagos, and that allows me to threaten Glacial Lance and also threaten like coaching, close combat into close combat, which I've done against Roxanne and different like very kind of heavy pressure board positions because I don't want to have to let the the Tropicos get Calm Mind up, but I saw them lead Booster Flutter with Grimmsnarl. I was like, okay, so I do know that they do like to rely on Grimmsnarl to beat Calyrex Ice. And I was a little surprised to see Booster Flutter on lead, but I wasn't that surprised. I did expect Booster Flutter to come in all 3 games because I don't set up Trick Room that often, and I do rely on Urshifu, and that's a free KO button if I don't tear Urshifu, and if they also have Thunder Wave threat, so it's like they have so many options into the Urshifu water that despite Urshifu being a pretty good piece in almost all of their pieces, they also have a lot of counterplay into it, but I think that my Urshifu being scary, a piece that I used well, was something Aurelian was definitely considering on lead. And I knew Aurelian wasn't somebody to often Terra turn 1, so I kind of saw the fake out Thunderbolt play into Grimmsnarl to put it in Grassy Glide range on that turn 1 of game 1 to be a really safe play, because I did know that I survived Booster Speed, Flutter Mane, Moonblast from my Raging Bolt, so I was able to get the fake out Thunderbolt play into Grimmsnarl. I didn't think they'd hard position to into Iron Hands, because I don't think they were going to play a game of chicken. I think they wanted to play into me as aggressively as I often play into other people. So I make the play of fake out Thunderbolt into Grimmsnarl. They go for Moonblast into Raging Bolt. I put myself in glide range against the Grimmsnarl. And then after that, I make the double up that Edu also made against Aurelian, which was the Grassy Glide Thunderbolt play, which didn't KO for me as well. So maybe we have similar sets. I don't know. I thought it would KO. But either way, it wasn't that big of a deal. It left Fluttermane in the red. They repositioned Grimmsnarl into Iron Hands, predicting that I would just make the safe Grassy Glide into Grimmsnarl. Was able to get that big damage off. They were able to Moonblast my Raging Bolt at the end of game 2. And then Raging Bolt exited the field. They had a red health Fluttermane. They had a red health Grimmsnarl. They had fake out pressure with hands. And then I was able to get Calyrex in on game 3, or turn 3 of game 1. And then once I got Calyrex on the field, they had fake out pressure, so I believe I hard positioned Rillaboom into Incineroar to get the Intimidate off, predicting that they would fake out reposition Flutterman or fake out, I believe they had Shadow Ball. So I want to cover for the fake out Shadow Ball play and also reposition with my instant to get fake out pressure on the hands, which would be turn 4, they hard position Flutter out because they're afraid of the Grassy Glide pressure because they're trying to fake out anyway. So yeah, they switch out to Terapagos. I switch an Instant. I have fake out pressure. Iron Hands is -1, so they just go for Drain Punch on Instant. I fake out Terapagos. I go for Glacial Lance, does big damage, puts them both in the yellow. That's the end of this turn. I'm trying to pull. This is a lot of turns. I'm trying to pull off memory.
But I think that once you got to the position where they had 2 Pokemon in
this
red
position,
in back,
I felt like I'd won.
Terra Shell was gone. Like, you were exerting so much pressure, they actually couldn't OHKO anything. Like, it seemed like from here, if you played safely and you just made the right plays from here on out, and it was
and
pretty. It was
I think
done.
the cool thing about game 1 too is Terapagos never got off damage. Which was really I think unnerving for Aurelian, because I think they expected Terapagos to exert so much pressure against me. But yeah, Terapagos, this is the play where I think they go for Dark Pulse plus Wild Charge, doing the thing that I described that they do earlier, which is covering for Terras. I was able to freely reposition my fake out again. They have that habit. So that was a really good habit that I identified in their play. The Wild Charge, to cover my Terra Water.
And the crowd was popping off so hard after that. It was crazy.
Yes. Yeah. So after that, we went to game 2. Game 2, Aurelian dominated me. Was not close, but it did kind of confirm the fact that Aurelian. The big pop off from the crowd was the Grimmsnarl Terra Ghost in game 2. That was great.
And so I have a question about game 2.
Yeah.
Because I remember it must have been, I think it was turn 1, where I saw you hover over the Terra Water. I think you clicked it, and then you checked your Monson back. And I remember thinking, oh, wait, Terra Water is kind of nice here. And then you showed that you didn't have Pelipper back. And then you clicked off of it. Were you, this is the wrong game, but were you thinking about doing the line that you did game 3 and game 2?
Yeah, but I also knew that I wanted to do the foul play, but I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be patient, and I'm okay with losing game 2 if they outplay me, because it's a best of 3, right? It's not that big of a deal if you lose a game, at least from my perspective. I think as much as I am a very proactive player. I like to make like positions that advance the board state. I'm not impatient. I'm okay with losing a game or bringing it to 3 if it means that I feel like I have an advantage going to the next game instead of trying to claw my way back from a bad position. But I think this is this the play where no, this is turn 1. So this is when
this is
they
turn
call
one. Yeah.
me. Yeah, this is where they Terra Starstorm my ensign. In my
Yeah.
parting shot, they absolutely call me here. They foul play, I think, too, though, to cover for it.
But this is where I was looking at
This
it. I was
gave
like,
me
oh, the Terra water. That's kind of smart. And then you didn't it just debate the Terra, and I was kind of I figured out what you're going to do game 3 based on what you were clicking game 2. But it was a
well, I'm
really
glad.
clever line.
Yeah,
I thought you had planned it out.
yeah, yeah. I did have it planned out, but I realized that I accidentally, or not accidentally, but I brought Bolt, and I think that the reason why is because I did expect the Terapagos Grimsnarl adjustment eventually, but I did not
Mm-hmm.
expect it in game 2. So seeing it in game 2 is actually rather happy because Aurelian is a confident player, and if they win with something, they also have a habit of just re-leading and saying, "I'm so much better than you." Like not saying that literally, but like kind of their presence says that they are better than you and they don't mind making the same plays twice or leading the same thing twice because they're just a better player than most people. Including I think they're a better player than myself. They have way more accomplishments. They're a very excellent player and they play confidently. So kind of seeing this is why I made the adjustment game 3 instead of because Raging Bolt's good, but Raging Bolt's not like that good into the team. I knew I wanted to bring Pelipper eventually, especially if it went to a game 3. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, game 2 is more information gathering. Like if you go to the play where Aurelian goes for fake out and Terra Ghost, right? If you scroll back to like the very beginning of the play, I think you can see me leaning over to look at the sheets because I was like, there's a pretty good chance Aurelian just Terra Ghosts. I'm not sure if I do. I know I did think about it at least that Aurelian could Terra Ghost, but I was like, I want to make sure that they make the play,
Let's
or
see.
at
Let's see
least
if
I
we can
hesitate to fake
zoom
out.
in. You're a stoic the entire time. You're
Yeah,
not giving out any tells.
yeah. I tried not to, but I know I was thinking about the fake out into the Tarop because I was like, okay, will they Terra? And I was kind of, I think I nodded after at least. There was some tell where I was like, okay,
Yep, I
yeah,
see the
yeah, I
nod.
nod there. Yeah. So I knew that was an option. I wanted to see if Aurelian would take the option because I think that also, similar to that lead where they led Tarop Grimsnarl, it kind of gave me an idea of how they'd approach game 3. Um, and like you said, I knew the Terra water option was there to like absorb a foul play pretty well and then, bait the Terra. But I also knew that I think if I was greedy and made that play in game 2 and faked out with Ensign and Terra Water Glacial Lance, even without Pelipper, I think Relevant forces the drop to Terra, unlike Ensign. Because if they don't immediately remove the terrain after the fake out Glacial Lance chip, they just die to Woodhammer. So I really, really wanted to commit to the bait of making them bait Terapagos into terraring. Because if they do not Terra from that like chip health of fake out Glacial Lance into Woodhammer, if they don't Terra to gain the extra health and remove terrain, they just die to Woodhammer. So I wanted to make sure the board state was like, even though I was making a read that they would do something, I wanted to like have the highest probability of the read succeeding, if that makes sense.
hmm
So
Absolutely,
yeah,
and I think that it was such a brilliant line too. I mean, it was not something that I'm not at all experienced with using relevant caloric size, so I'm sure this is something that you figured out over time. But like, man, it was not something that I would ever see coming as the opponent either. You set up grassy terrain and you Terra, and it's like, oh wow, this is just the freest terrestrialization of my life. So
exactly.
it was the greatest bait, and the best part was this game, unlike last game, you panned over to your Pokemon in the back. This time you did not. You were confident, and
Yeah,
it was the sickest reveal to put on camera. I think it just really made the moment where we were like,
and
oh, you brought something different.
I really don't think that if I let Ensign, this line works either.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you need the Woodhammer pressure through Reflect at that health to really bait the Terra. Because like even though my Ensign's adamant, it isn't Woodhammer grassy terrain adamant. It's not gonna do the same damage. It's like you need that Woodhammer pressure there. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really important. And that like you said, it's like that is the freest like Terapagos Terra of your life. So yeah, I was very proud of that line. That was something I did figure out the night before, so I'm really glad I got to actually do it.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to find the
And like you
moment.
said,
It,
yeah,
it, it was right here. It was the moment that you clicked U-turn, and then we see the Pelipper in the back, and everyone realizes exactly what's going to happen, and that
yeah,
you're in such a dominant position, and it was
yeah.
just such a great moment.
Yeah. And yeah, even talking about that Urshifu thing, Aurelia makes a really weird play here. And I think I understood it afterwards why they made the play, which was instead of foul playing into foul playing on Calyrex, they thunder waved the Calyrex. And I did mention to Aurelia and I was like, why? And they were like, because I was worried about Urshifu in the back. So yeah, I think it's really funny how sometimes team preview and like especially in day 3 where you know your player that you're playing and you know habits of people, the fact that if you're aware of your own habits and aware of your own faults, you can kind of metagame yourself, which is something I feel like I did against Aurelian as well by
Mhm.
kind of not bringing the Urshifu.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you have more to say about this match, but I think from here you're just kind of clicking safe buttons until you got to.
Yeah, I ended up having 4 Pokemon, so like even in the Flutter Chiyu endgame, I don't think I lose just because I still have, even if I get parried on Calyrex, just because I have so many pieces in the back to clean up. But yeah, I felt pretty confident after getting the wide guard up that I was going to win.
Mhm. And so I think you mentioned on stream. So you had no idea that your dad was coming up for the finals.
I did not. That was all schemed up by my best friend and them. They believed in me, unlike I guess as much as I believed in myself, obviously going to finals. I wouldn't have tried so hard if I didn't. But they started driving from Jacksonville, Florida. Like when I got into top 8, they got a hotel. They went like overnight, drove to pull up into New Orleans, and my best friend and a couple people in my BNB. I mean, the whole BNB was in on it. Like all of my friends from Florida VGC. They all kind of like schemed behind the scenes because I had to leave early, obviously for check in for finalists. So I was there at like 12. So like afternoon, a couple of my friends like were really, really kind, selfless. They actually gave their spectator passes to my family because they couldn't get enough spectator passes themselves. So they gave away some of their spectator passes so they could go see me. And then also like they just kept them entertained and hidden the entire time while I was playing. And that was really awesome. I've got great friends and a wonderful family for sure.
Yeah, it was super cool to see. I know you've given a few different interviews, and I'm sure you've talked about this a lot. So you've been, I mentioned this before we recorded. You've been on a little bit of a victory lap recently. You've been
Yeah.
on a couple podcasts, including our own on Top Takes. Got to show that. I haven't watched that yet. I was not on that one. But I saw you on Chilling Day. I saw you were on Oko. Are there any
Yep.
what I'm gonna put you on the spot. What was the favorite podcast you've recorded other than Top Takes?
Other than Tubgates, I don't want to do that. I don't want to pick a favorite just because honestly, I'm just really grateful to like be getting this attention. It's like it's a very weird feeling because you know you if somebody who's a newer player, somebody that isn't in like the top circles or perceived as a top player, being treated with like respect, even like not saying Pokemon players are disrespectful, but being treated with like respect or some sort of like interest is a really like humbling feeling. I feel very grateful. And I don't want to pick a favorite. This sounds like a very political answer, but I don't want to pick a favorite just because I feel really lucky. Like I feel very happy. It is a victory lap, but I also like am kind of treating this as a I was very inspired by people like Justin Tang and other players who like had their breakout performances. And I feel like the more I tell my story, even if it's repetitive and I'm saying the same thing over and over on multiple podcasts, I hope that other players like can believe in themselves and like see myself in them and they feel motivated to like play the game and not doubt themselves and like feel like they can also have their breakout performances. So yeah, the answer is I've loved everyone. Everyone's been great. I think the most interesting thing is I'm doing some like recorded content with people, like scripted content. And I think that's probably been more fun than the podcast, just because I get kind of a behind the scenes perspective on how they do stuff. But I guess this is also a part of that, right? So
Mhm.
this kind of like behind the scenes like video making stuff. So I'm just
I
enjoying it. I'm pretty happy. I love Pokemon. I'm glad that I'm able to like people want to hear me yap for like an hour about my team over and over. That's crazy.
It's no, I'm I that is the correct answer, by the way. Very politically correct, but absolutely. I mean, it
Yeah.
is. It's you've been such a great guest here, and I've listened to some of your other podcasts, and I mean, it's so fun to listen to you talk. You're really good at this. You should honestly, you should start doing content yourself because I think people would love to hear more from you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Maybe I just like this is my personality. I don't like I don't I'm not gonna say anything about it, but I don't feel ready yet. Not because of any other reason. I feel like I need to prove myself more. I need to do better at other things where I feel like I'm able to do content or like feel like I'm a voice in the community. If that makes sense.
Mhm. Well,
That might not make sense, but yeah.
no, I get it because I
Yeah.
didn't start doing content until 2020, and I'd been playing for a few
Hmm.
years. So I get that
Yeah.
for sure. But regardless, it is always great to have you on the channel. It is always great to talk to you. This
Yeah.
was a really fun report, and I learned a
Yeah.
lot about your team and how you play it and how you think about Pokemon, which is a very
Mhm.
different perspective than I come from. And so I really appreciated hearing about that. Um, I definitely recommend that everyone tries out this team. We've got the rental code on screen. We'll have the paste in the description down below. Did you have any final words or shout outs that you want to give?
I'll just do like very broad shout outs. Shout out to my family, shout out to my friends, shout out to Florida VGC, and shout out to Audi CK49 for having me on. I hope this is my only team report. I hope I can be on again after another good performance. So that's
Oh,
my goal.
absolutely.
That's my next goal in Pokemon. Yeah.
I am looking forward to that for sure. Well, that's going to do it from us. Thank you all for watching. Congratulations once again on winning
Yeah,
the North
thank
American
you.
International Championships. And yeah, until next time, I will see you all later.